On this episode of Trend Chat, we have Wade Miller talking about President Trump's first 100 days coming up. Yes, and welcome to another episode of Trend Chat. I'm your host, Brian Bledsoe. And if you want to contact us on social media, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, it's all the same name, Trend Chat 24/7. And I also write for Politichicks. If you want to read some of my articles on Politichicks.com, just go to Politichicks.com/author/Brian Bledsoe. And speaking of Politichicks, they are on a book tour. Anne-Marie Morrell and Morgan Brittany and Sonia Sasser, they're out doing a book tour for our new book. I say our because one of my articles is in the book about becoming a delegate at the Republican National Convention up in Cleveland. So, and the book, I don't want to forget to tell you the name. The name is Politichicks, A Clarion Call to Political Activism, which you can purchase on Amazon, and it's also available at Barnes & Noble. So definitely encourage you to go get one of those copies. It's a great book with plenty of contributions from a lot of the contributors of Politichicks, over 300 pages, talking about all different subjects, whether it's healthcare, education, social issues. And like I said, one of my articles, my article is actually in the one about political activism. So in that section. So yeah, so like I said, definitely check that out. And actually, given that this is a Thursday episode and we're pretty much coming up on President Trump's first 100 days, you're actually getting two episodes. It's going to be Thursday today, and also another one on Friday. So, and then, the one on Friday would definitely be recorded because while that's, I guess, uploaded, I will be at the NRA annual meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and record that probably later on tonight or something and upload it first thing Friday morning or something. But the first, this episode will be with Wade Miller with Heritage Action to talk about President Trump's first 100 days and I guess how, how things are going with, as far as just wondering where we're going and how things can be improved upon. I mean, I think we all have seen as far as what happened with the Obamacare replacement plan and how that kind of fell apart for obvious reasons. So we get into all of that, and also tomorrow we will have Rosie Johnson on to speak about President Trump's first 100 days as well. So those two episodes are coming up. The one with Wade Miller you're hearing right now, but the one on Friday will be tomorrow. So, and then depending on how many, interviews I have, we might have a full week of Trend Chat episodes, just depending on, because I remember back at CPAC, I didn't know I was going to have as many interviews that I had. So we'll see. And if, You'll find out probably on Sunday. I will post and I'll see how much I have and how much I need to edit and break up into how many days, and I'll know for certain on Sunday if it's going to be 5 days or not. So before I get into the interview with Wade Miller, I just also want to mention about the Founding Project. And as I mentioned on Tuesday, I know to people who may have listened to this program more than once, if you listen to it at least one time since now, you've heard me talk about the Founding Project. And now I have a few more details than the normal, I guess the normal description I would have. So, but I would go with the regular description first, and just saying that they're bringing civics to citizens and educating citizens on the founding documents like Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and just hopefully to get people more informed as far as what it means to be a citizen here in the great state of the United States of America. And so, but now, an update is that they have launched their Facebook page and have starting a video series about civics. So all that is coming up soon. And if you want to find their Facebook page, you can just search The Founding Project. And if you want to go to their Facebook group, it's also the same name. Just search for The Founding Project. All right. So I definitely wanted to make sure I get that out. I don't want to forget in the midst of the interview, and then after it's over, and then I forget because I get caught up in the points of the interview. So right now we're just gonna get started with the interview we had with Wade Miller, and I'm a Seminole with Heritage Action, and I definitely am. I'm well informed, especially with Heritage Action, with all the things that they provide as far as just kind of understanding what's going on in Washington, because you have a lot of experts in the organization that are well versed in knowing all the, I guess the complex nature that I feel intentionally is put in to make everyday people who are working like your 9-to-5 jobs that are not able to just sit back and have to decipher all of this legalese that tend to go into a lot of these the process of whether it's just making laws in general. So, and Heritage Action is they definitely are helpful in sorting through all that. So Wade Miller is the regional coordinator of South Central region of I think if I remember, I don't remember. I think if I asked him or not, but I think it's Texas and Oklahoma, but I don't know exactly. But I would say go to heritageaction.com and find out. So here's our interview with Wade Miller. Hello, this is TrendChat. I'm your host, Brian Bledsoe, and we are pleased to have Heritage Action Regional Coordinator Joseph Wade Miller with us. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Yeah, no, I definitely come to you as far as whenever we want to talk about politics and just kind of get the goings on of what's going on up in Washington, D.C. And first, I want to ask you, so what is your opinion of President Trump's first 100 days?
Well, I mean, that's, of course, a huge topic, and I think you really have to break it down into sections here. On the regulatory front, I think that he's doing very well. So he's put forward a series of executive orders to the degree that he is able to, through executive orders, to kind of roll back some of these unnecessary and burdensome regulations. He's not done. This is going to be a constant theme of his presidency, identifying, stopping, rolling back regulations. Congress is also, to their credit, although in many ways they're fumbling and not doing what they're supposed to be doing, one of the ways that Congress is succeeding right now is they are using the Congressional Review Act to stop a lot of the rules that and regulations that the Obama administration put through. And because of a procedural loophole, they didn't cross their I's and dot their T's, so to speak. I said that backwards on purpose, of course, but they messed up, and they didn't submit their final reports. And until they submitted those final reports, essentially the clock on finalizing those rules and regulations didn't start. And so what's happening now is Congress is now putting forward those reports. The 60-day clock starts, and then they almost immediately bring them down to the floor for a quick up or down vote. It just simply takes a simple majority. And so these are being shot down a little bit at a time. And over a longer period of time, the effects of that will be tremendous on the economy. It's a kind of a nickel and dime your way in the right direction approach to improving the economy. So on the regulatory front, the rulemaking front, kind of reducing the impact of the federal government on the economy and on business, that's moving along fairly well. In other ways, there's some things that President Trump has had an opportunity to do that he has not yet done. For instance, there is some language out there regarding a very strong religious liberty executive order that would have addressed the Johnson Amendment issues, the Russell Amendment issues, and First Amendment Defense Act issues. And these are all just different variations of areas where we need better religious liberty protections regarding how the federal government acts. And that has not gone forward. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but we'd like to see that moving forward. And then, there's been some other positive executive orders in terms of kind of stemming the tide of radical ideology into the country. There was a temporary halt on refugees and non-citizens coming into the United States from several countries. Now, of course, the courts acted outside of what I think is their constitutional Article 3 powers, and it's important to note that these courts are also subservient to Congress, except for the Supreme Court, which is a constitutional entity. The rest of the federal courts are created by Congress. So essentially, these courts have said that they can overturn plenary powers granted to Congress in Article 1 and plenary powers granted to the President in Article 2. And so they basically halted those executive orders regarding refugees from 7 different countries. And that we're kind of in a stalemate there. That was a good attempt by Trump, I think, to establish national sovereignty, to address radical ideologies coming into our border. And that's not his fault that he's been halted on that front. That's the court's fault. And then in other areas, I think that you're seeing some backing away, which I would like him not to do as president. So, for instance, the Export-Import Bank. This is something that President Trump campaigned against, but he's talking about putting someone in charge of it. And, I think that there's no real point in putting someone in charge of something that you're planning on getting rid of. Now, in fairness, perhaps he's putting someone in charge of it to help wind it down. We don't know. We'll see how this plays out, but that's something we want to keep our eye on. And of course, the Export-Import Bank is just a federal government program that basically deals in crony capitalism. And also, it's not fair in our free market because it gives special government financing and loans to foreign entities that would compete with American companies. And so I think that this entire program is kind of contrary to the theme that Trump ran on in his presidency about America first. And to more of my concern is that it's just anti-free market. It's picking winners and losers, and I dislike policies like that to begin with. And then in other areas, it's been a mixed bag. So, for instance, we have to be fair, I think, and in some ways people are saying that on some issues he's flip-flopping. And I think it's fair to say that he's backed away from some promises. So, for instance, he has not undone DACA, which is an amnesty program, and he said he would. He said he would. But then in other cases, we have to be a little bit more fair. So he said that he would label China a currency manipulator. He's backed away from that. Now, some would say that's flip-flopping. I think that in context, if you look at this and you think to yourself, well, he's working with the Chinese to directly be a deterrent to the threat of North Korea, I think it makes sense. I think that it's okay in this case, given what he's trying to accomplish, that he's backed away from that promise for now. I think that there's a greater good being served by negotiating with China. So, for instance, China sent 150,000 troops to the North Korean border. They've stopped coal shipments from North Korea. They are now putting a lot of pressure on North Korea, which could possibly prevent a major conflict in the region. So I think it makes sense, depending on what Trump is backing away from, what's the full context, why is he doing it. Some of the issues I might disagree with. On others, I think that the context kind of bears out that may be the more logical approach. And then, we get into the healthcare, and which has been, of course, a big deal. And I think that in this case, initially, I think that Trump misstepped. I think that he put too much faith in Paul Ryan as Speaker of the House. I think that the bill put forward by Speaker Ryan was a very flawed bill, which would essentially not address the rising costs in healthcare premiums that American families are being hurt by. And I think that they didn't really think out the political dynamics of what would happen in 2 or 3 years if prices were still skyrocketing, and how would that affect midterms, and how would that affect the next presidency. But more importantly, it's just not good policy. It's not what the GOP has campaigned on for 7 years. It's not what they've promised for 7 years. It's not what they've indicated they would fundamentally undo. It's not in the Republican Party platform. And so I think that there was a little bit of dissatisfaction that Trump was at first so willing to allow Paul Ryan to move forward with this. And in fact, Trump himself put a lot of pressure on the House Freedom Caucus members who, to their credit, stood up to this health care bill. And in their minds, I think it's fair to point out, I think that they actually thought they were protecting the Trump administration and protecting him from this bill, which would have been an ambush on his next presidential run had this thing gone forward. And right now, I think that he's playing a role of being more of a facilitator and not leaning as hard as he had been on the House Freedom Caucus. I think that he has perhaps realized they may have had some very good points and is now encouraging the more liberal Republicans in the Republican Party, the members of the so-called Tuesday group, to come to the table and start making a deal. And I think that the House Freedom Caucus conservatives, heroes like Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, Gary Palmer, Dave Brat, they have been standing firm, I think, in the best interests of the American people, even given an immense amount of pressure that has been brought to bear against them at first. And I think we're going to be in a better place in the long term, although I don't think that the final healthcare product will be perfect. Far from it, in fact. I think it will be much better than it would have been otherwise. And we still have an opportunity in the Senate to improve this even more, where I think that we once again have a pretty strong firewall with Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Tom Cotton, and perhaps 2 or 3 others who really want to see this bill improved. And I think it's important to remember that in 2015, when we were doing a trial run of this reconciliation process to repeal Obamacare, the House put forward a very bad bill. In fact, Heritage Action, he voted against it because it just barely touched Obamacare. It left a lot of it in place. And when it did pass, unfortunately, but it went to the Senate, at which point Mitch McConnell, to his credit, and this isn't normal. Normally things get worse in the Senate. But in this case, the bill got much better. And we got, in the end of that, we actually ended up with the 2015 Obamacare reconciliation bill, which was a pretty good foundation. It still didn't get rid of the Title I regulations, which is what the House Freedom Caucus is pushing for right now, but it got rid of most everything else. And I think that if we use that language, included the Title I regulations, and I think at least the conservatives would be happy. Now, the liberals, Republicans who don't want to get rid of Obamacare might not be. But right now, I think Trump is being a positive voice and trying to get a compromise done, even if he's not necessarily 100% on board with maybe everything that I would personally prefer. I think that he is being productive and encouraging discussions to take place. And I think that Mike Pence has been doing a good job of that as well. And then the last thing I'll mention in terms of the first 100 days is I think that, overall it's a pretty good cabinet. Now, I'm not going to get into specifics. There's some that I like more than others. There's some that I don't think are very good, and there's some that I think are great. But I think that you're seeing a fairly solid cabinet. I think that some, over time, the weaker ones will kind of, work their way out, and they'll be replaced over time. The bigger problem that I have is that there's still hundreds of basically deputy positions that need to be appointed. And until we get to that, until all of those positions are appointed, it's going to be really hard at the program level in all these federal agencies for the Trump administration to start ferreting out all of these problematic government employees who are perhaps even working against the interests of the Trump administration. Because, as you can put someone in charge of the Department of Justice, but until you have people on the ground floor, at lower positions that are in and amongst all of the employees, they're just not going to be able to figure out exactly who and is on our side and who isn't and who's working against us. And so I think one of the priorities needs to be for the Trump administration, besides repealing Obamacare, besides tax reform, is getting this administration in place. And I hope that the Senate will, kind of bust their butts to help get that done as well. And that could last well into the summer, unfortunately, which means that it will be, another 6 to 12 months before they really get everything at the bureaucracy level kind of locked down and figured out and start moving in a more efficient and productive, direction.
Well, that's definitely all that I needed to know. I mean, that's exactly, I asked the question, that's exactly what I needed. And I also wanted to point out that Heritage Action, is definitely I guess you say a influence in all of these issues that are going on. So in case people maybe not, don't know about Heritage Action, tell us a little bit about the program and all that in general.
So the Heritage Foundation is a conservative public policy think tank. They worked a lot with Reagan. In fact, that's really where they became prominent. In fact, at Reagan's first cabinet meeting, he put a manual out in front of everyone, which was the Heritage Foundation product. And it was basically a blueprint for how do we get this government, leaner and more efficient, and how do we gear everything towards a more limited government vision. And, they got a lot of that put in place, and I think that the Reagan recovery was quite successful, and it's not that, Heritage doesn't take full credit for that, but I think that they definitely played a big part in helping move that along. And ever since then, they've been quite prominent in the conservative movement and in public policy circles. That isn't to say that, they're always right or that they're always, we're going to go into dead ends and figure out that some ideas are better than others. And when we realize that, we, move on and correct ourselves. But right around the time that Obamacare passed, it was very clear on the ground inside the Capitol that the conservative movement was just being outmatched and outgunned by all of the different special interest groups, all the lobbyists that were in there. And that's just something that we couldn't compete with. We can put forward a policy paper, but when an industry group or a union or a pharmaceutical company or an insurance company comes out and says, hey, we have, 1,000 employees in your district, and it's really important that, you support this or else we might, move our plant somewhere else, or we've got X amount of supporters in your district. That's just really hard to compete with. And so Heritage decided it was time to, move forward and find a better way to get these things done. And that's when Heritage Action was kind of dreamt up. And our focus is accountability, and we also have a grassroots component. So we have Heritage Action Sentinels through our Sentinel program in every congressional district across the country. We work closely with them to make sure that they know what's going on with Congress, what's being voted on, whether legislation is good or bad. Make sure they understand the process, because for years what was happening is members of Congress were hiding behind the complexities of process and procedure to disguise what was really going on. And so, everyone at Heritage Action is quite familiar with congressional procedure and process and parliamentarian and rules. And so we can kind of cut through all the spin and let people know what's actually going on so that they can then re-engage their members of Congress and their staff and let them know that they know what's going on, or to support them. There's a lot of good conservative members out there, and they need our help and our support. And so that's what we're here to do. And that's mainly facilitated through our Sentinel program and through our scorecard, where we rate every single member of Congress at heritageaction.com. You can go just click on the scorecard and see how your member is voting. And you can break it down by each vote, and each vote is explained, and we explain why it was a good or bad vote. And so then you can, unfortunately, there's a lot of Republicans who talk a good game when it comes to being pro-life. They're very pro-Second Amendment. They talk about fiscal responsibility. And so a lot of voters just naturally assume, well, did they say the right thing? So they must be fairly conservative. And then they'll go to their scorecard and see that they've got a 40%. And they'll see that they voted to, fund Planned Parenthood or, any number of different things which are directly contrary to the things they may say on their campaign trails. And so that's what we're here to do. We're here to shine a light on D.C. and to be a resource for conservatives on the ground who are trying to bend Congress our direction.
Yeah,
say a more conservative direction.
Yeah, it's funny because when you mentioned the scorecard, you have some Republican members of Congress that are lower than Democrats or, I guess, independents, socialists, like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, like Republicans.
Oh, yeah.
That are below them.
Right. And these people are people who run on the Republican Party platform but are outvoted by Democrats. It's absurd. But it's even worse. If you're in a Democrat district, let's say it's a D+3 district, and you've got like a 25 or 30% on our scorecard, and you're a Republican in New York, I'm not saying that's okay. What I'm saying is that I understand in the context of why they couldn't maybe be like Ted Cruz. That doesn't mean they have to be as bad as they are, or that they have to go out of their way to attack conservatives. But there's a certain reality here that we understand. If you're in a Democrat +3 district, you're not going to be as good as Ted Cruz or Mike Lee or Rand Paul. I think the bigger problem, and certainly this is an issue in Texas, is almost every single one of the Republican-held seats here are heavily Republican. In fact, I think that only one would be considered a swing district, and the other 90% are heavily Republican, meaning that there's really no chance that a Democrat could ever win that seat, except for some statistical fluke. And the problem here is that a lot of these members are in the 60% or the 65% or the 50% range on our scorecard, and there's just no excuse for that. If you're a Republican in the state of Texas, or if you're a Republican in Oklahoma, and you don't have an 85, 90%, there's a problem. There's a disconnect between what you think the purpose of the Republican Party is and what your voters think. And the problem is that a lot of voters just don't know. And so that's why we're trying to get out there and cut through the spin and make sure they know exactly what their members are voting for, and that we need to vote for them based on, we don't do campaigns, but I would urge people to vote for their member based on their voting record and not based on their campaign rhetoric.
Yeah. And, it's definitely, in talking about the scorecard, I was just thinking about that, and that was just so disheartening to see that. So, but now something actually just happened today. that you had a group of protesters going to the Heritage Foundation in Washington D.C. Now I don't know all the details about it, but do you know anything about what was going on there?
Yes, this was a kind of a organized, grass top, funded protest to protest against the Heritage Foundation in opposition to President Trump's budget. And I think that the reason that they are targeting Heritage is because they are aware that in terms of budget crafting at the executive branch level, Heritage does have a lot of influence. Now, we do have people in the West Wing that were former Heritage staffers. We don't have ultimate say. We can't just snap our fingers. President Trump has a lot of influences on him. But Heritage is one of those influencers, and I think that we do have some people in the West Wing. And more importantly, if you look at the person that President Trump picked for director of the Office of Management and Budget, which is Mick Mulvaney. He's a former congressman who was a House Freedom Caucus member. Well, Mick Mulvaney brought on Russ Vought, and Russ Vought was the political director at Heritage Action. And so when you're hearing things about President Trump's budget, that is something that has been put together by Mick Mulvaney and Russ Vought. And I think that people understand that Heritage had a very big say in what areas of government would see spending cuts, what areas would see spending increases, whether that be defense or cutting out some of the non-essential programs in order to make sure that we're getting to the more important essential government programs, and we're already spending more than we bring in. But nevertheless, they don't like it. And so they came over to Heritage and started protesting against us, I guess based on the premise that if we don't provide everyone in the country everything that they could possibly want and need from government, then somehow we don't like people, or we don't like children, or we don't like old people, which is, of course, just the tired old socialist argument. Now, it is a great budget. As a conservative, I think it's probably one of the best budgets ever been submitted by a presidential administration. The problem is that Congress, Speaker Ryan and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will likely ignore large portions of it, which is unfortunate because this is a great budget. This would put us on a path to addressing a lot of our fiscal issues. But we just don't have a Republican Party leadership right now that's interested in fiscal responsibility. They're more interested in the status quo, making deals with Democrats, and that's really unfortunate.
And that was, that was apparent when it comes to the whole, the Obamacare replacement plan. Exactly what you're saying. They're not really interested in repealing Obamacare, and that's kind of, we're seeing that right now.
Right. Yeah. The final product is something that essentially doesn't fully repeal Obamacare. Well, not the final product. The product that is before us so far, and this may change if the House Freedom Caucus can get a deal done. But the product that we saw essentially just kind of went a different route in some cases of how Obamacare had done it. They just did it slightly differently. And in other cases, just left huge portions of Obamacare in place. In fact, I was talking earlier about Title I regulations. If you go look at Obamacare, Title I is the very first section of Obamacare. The plan that was brought forward by Paul Ryan left Title I. And by the way, this is the part of Obamacare that has the biggest impact on the cost of your health care, and it is directly responsible for increasing costs. They left that entirely in place. They didn't even touch it. And it's almost impossible to say that you have repealed Obamacare if the core regulatory infrastructure of Obamacare is still in place. And that's just unfortunate. That's just where our Republican Party is at right now. It is not really intent on upholding their promise, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I definitely appreciate you coming on with us at this time, and you definitely gave plenty of information that I needed, and hopefully that, I guess, President Trump and the Congress in general just I say will continue just to do better and just make sure as far as doing basically just doing what was promised in the campaign, whether it's President Trump or members of Congress. So definitely appreciate it. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just saying amen to that, Brian. I agree 100%.
All right. Well, appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yep. Have a good one. Thanks for having me on.
And thank you to Wade Miller for coming on. And I definitely would like to see, more happening. I mean, like I said, it is only 100 days, but it definitely need to. There was a lot of promises made during the campaign, and like I said, not only from President Trump, but also from members of Congress as well. So Heritage Action and other groups as well. Just make sure we just keep them all accountable to those promises. So that's it for today. Tomorrow we will have Rosie Johnson to talk about President Trump's first 100 days as well. And right now we are in Georgia. We are right outside Atlanta. We'll probably be checking in on in our hotel, I guess around probably 1 o'clock or something. But so on Friday, whenever you're listening, but on the Friday episode, we'll upload that, and while we're at the convention. And as I said before, I'm definitely looking forward to this and being my first NRA annual meeting and just being a part of all that. I'm really excited. I'm ready to go. Ready to get there now, actually. So I definitely appreciate you listening in. And as I've said many times before, if you like it, just subscribe on iTunes, Google Play. I don't think I mentioned that in a while, but TrendChat is on Google Play and iTunes. So go on, whether it's on there or like it on Spreaker or wherever, or share it. We appreciate everything as far as just getting the show out there as much as possible, and we definitely appreciate everyone that's been listening so far. So, well, until tomorrow, which is a little different, but we'll be back tomorrow with Rosie Johnson, and until then, we will chat with you later.